love to start with loyalty. I think that that's the most relevant conversation in terms of just like what's going on in the country and with families. And so you talked in the afterword about this idea of taking a real person, all you knew was his name, his death, and you made everything else up. And can you unpack a little bit about your process for doing that and whether or not you had any reservations about making up a fictional life around somebody who was actually alive?
I think over the years, and I've been writing now for a long time, my process has changed. I like to think it's better. I'm not sure it is. There are a number of things that are very obvious. The books have become longer. I think they've become a little bit more complex. And I think they have, again, I like to think they've become deeper and more interesting, but that's a reader's perception. I don't know anyone in the world, and that includes my wife, who's read all my books. I was talking to her the other day about some book of mine, and she said, I ought to read that one. So, yeah, she should. But nobody has, and I'm not wishing it on anyone. But I suppose if somebody did, there'd be certain themes and ways of writing that would stand out. But I don't know what they are. In other words, every book that I do is separate in both its conception, unless it's a sequel, obviously. But essentially, I start on a story, and what has become my method is I, as it were, write the shell of the book, the exoskeleton, if you will, the plot. And then I go back over and over and over again and fill it up with ideas, hopefully real humanity to give it life and meaning in that way. So that's the way I'm working these days. That said, here I am working on a new book, sort of struggling with it. And I should say this, the books become harder to write as I get older. I would like to think, I wish it was so. Having written so much, I could fall off the log with a book in my hand. It doesn't work that way. It seems to get harder. My excuse for that is that my standards are higher, and so that I'm fussier and fussier and want it better and better. I don't even know if that's true. Maybe I'm just getting old. So anyway, so I'm working on this new book, and it's hard. And then all of a sudden, I'm writing it in the first person, and I'm saying, well, maybe it should be in the third person. So I rewrite a portion of the book and trying to decide what's the right approach. What I'm trying to suggest, Eric, is that I'm inventing as I go along. It's easy for me to talk of process, but I don't know if I have a concrete one. I just simply sit down and try to make the book work. And that takes endless revisions. And when I get to the end, the first draft, I've already revised the book countless times. And then I go back and revise it all over again. And then at a certain point, I will share it with one or two other people. Usually the first one is my wife. I read it to her. And yes, I'm reading it to her, and she gives very good critiques. She's very, very smart. But I'm also listening, and I'm, as it were, evaluating the book on my own terms. And when I read it to her, it's only always with a pen in my hand, and I'm marking the manuscript as I go along. And then I have one or two friends who are I trust and good readers. We exchange books and so forth, and I get good criticism, and then I go back and revise again. And then at a certain point, it's useless to keep. I'm doing little tiny things, and then I have to give it to my editor, and then I revise again because the editor will inevitably come back. In all my years, only once has an editor say, "Oh, good, I'm going to send it to my copy editor." And when he did that, I said, "No, no, no, stop. I have more things to do with it." I stopped him. So it's never really happened that the book I wrote goes from my computer to copy editing and is done. It never happens. So when you talk about process, essentially it's constant revision, constantly. And sometimes big changes happen, and then I go through the whole thing again. I like to say I revise a book 70 or 80 times. I don't know how many times, maybe more, probably more. And it's just intuitive. I would be useless as an instructor in writing because I don't know what to tell people. I'll just say rewrite. And hopefully they do. So that doesn't answer your question, but that's truly as best as I can do.
No, that's good talking points though, because now, before you were talking about, sorry, I'm blanking. You're talking about how your books are becoming deeper.
I like to think so.
Yeah. So do you think that when you're tackling these stories, you're thinking deeper, or are you striving to make them more meaningful than I guess you felt
No,
they
I'm not
were?
striving. I think, when I was a young guy, we were all young once, right? And I had pretty set convictions about things the way young people do. And as I've gotten older, those set convictions, those notions have modified and simplified and generalized. I now believe strongly that having a complex, rigid system of beliefs doesn't work. I used to describe myself by one philosophy or another. Now I like to think being pragmatic, deciding what works is the best way to solve problems so that I don't have a particular ideology. I've come to hate ideology in the sense that it puts people in a box. And you probably, as I did, looked at those pictures of the universe yesterday. It's very big. It's very big. And my point of view is irrelevant in that world, in that universe, in that cosmos. To think that I have a system to explain things. I was looking at one of those images, and there was one of the scientists who's part of this project, and she says, "I don't know what that thing is there." And she pointed to a spot, and she didn't know what it was. And here she's this astrophysicist. So who the hell am I to think that I have answers to things? So I like to think that what I'm trying to do is describe things accurately. And that's the best approach that I can come up with.